into the field and working with local communities and working with collaborators. And I'm really passionate about science communication. So communicating the research that we do to a broader audience, whether that's the public, stakeholders, or other interested parties. So in preparing for this presentation, and I think reflecting a little bit on the year that has been, it is December, so I think we're all going, what did I get done and what's coming next year? I think my takeaway message from the year was sort of from, or maybe like thread throughout everything, was from global problems to local solutions. I think a really nice example of this was the Alta COP, which happened last month. So this is the first year that they've had an Alta COP. So I also had never heard of it before until I was invited to be a part of it. But I think it's a really awesome idea. I certainly feel that the big global COPs just have gotten so big and unwieldy that they've sort of lost their relevance for us, whether we're researchers or practitioners. I don't know what to make of COPs anymore. So Ultra COP is providing, this is their tagline: remote alternative to COP, keeping people informed about the happenings of COP in real time, all without traveling across the world. So I think it makes sense for a number of reasons. We don't all need to be traveling to meet in a massive stadium to talk about problems that are just getting too big and too confusing, but let's meet locally and regionally and talk about these problems within our local context. And that's exactly what happened at Alta COP. So it mirrored, it went for 2 whole weeks, mirroring the daily themes at COP itself. So we were like following on with these conversations and themes, but within the context of Singapore and the context of Asia. And I think it was really successful. So there was more than 2,000 attendees, and it was actually hosted in Singapore, Japan, Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia, which I think is amazing for its first year. They have also just announced that there will be an Alta COP 30. So I think it's only going to grow from here, and hopefully some of these conversations will continue next year. So I was fortunate enough to be invited to moderate this panel about the challenges of climate resilience in Singapore. So we had a really diverse panel, Kan Sang from the Building and Construction Authority, so from the government side, Nang Kwang from a sort of sustainability corporate role, and Yara Smits, who is a engineer at one of the big Dutch engineering firms here. So we had a really diverse group of people. And even though, it's a climate COP, we're talking a lot about climate, nature was all the way through the conversation, right? So when we're thinking about resilience, I don't think there is a conversation to be had without nature. I really liked the term that Yara Smits used, which was building with nature. I think we're throwing around a lot of terms at the moment, like nature positive, nature-based solutions, green infrastructure. I liked the way he used building with nature as sort of encompassing all the different ways that we work with nature in cities and think about the benefits that we get from them. Of course, we also discussed lots of the challenges of financing and quantifying and regulations. So yeah, lots of really interesting conversations that I will not go into, but are seeds to be planted for conversations in this group. In the few minutes I have left, I wanted to share a little bit about the research our lab does in this context. So back to the sort of goals of our lab is really thinking at the local scale, how nature-based solutions or building with nature works in our region, in our cities, making sure we have the data and the tools to support this and to support really good science-based policy and practice. So just a couple of the things that we do in the lab, and we love collaborating. So this is always an open door. We do a lot of local scale environmental monitoring. So on the left is a project I'm working on in Malacca, just across the border in Malaysia, where we installed these mini weather stations, mini temperature and humidity sensors that measure heat at this local scale. So we've got some in really dense built up parts of the city, others in parks, to really quantify this temperature difference and the urban heat island that we see. Another example of a project is led by a PhD student, Ning Ding, who is monitoring the effectiveness of rain gardens. We have a few on campus here at NTU, and she's monitoring this nature-based solution to see how well is it operating, what are the challenges, and what kinds of benefits is it providing. So these are the things we like to do in the field. We also work a lot with mapping and modeling. And one tool that we work a lot with is this tool for decision makers called INVEST, which is about mapping the benefits of nature. So thinking about what benefits nature provides us in cities, whether that's heat mitigation, recreation, it's good for our mental health. Thinking about who benefits from green space in a city. Is it equal? Are there maybe injustices in how nature is distributed? And then from the planning perspective, thinking where should we put new green spaces to sort of maximize these benefits? And so just to give a very, very quick example, maybe you all know Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park in Singapore. It's quite a famous nature-based solution. We mapped the land cover of this park, and from there, using this quite simple tool, we can estimate the cooling effect of the park, so the cooling effect it's having on the surrounding urban heat island. So this is just a taste of the kind of things we like to do. This is a really nice open source tool with minimal data requirements. It's not a fancy science model that no one can use. It's aimed for policymakers and practitioners. And it models a lot of different ecosystem services. I will leave it there. I wanted to finish on this lovely picture of us with our collaborators in Malacca to say we love working with people, and we're always looking for new opportunities to collaborate and strengthen these science policy practice links. So do feel free to get in touch by email. Corinne has a great website with information about the lab, or you can find us on LinkedIn. So thank you. I'll pass it back to you, Mika.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Emma. I'm also very interested in the urban invest because I was doing some research on it and was like, whoa, this can model all the stuff that I wanted to ask. But it also is dependent on the data that you put in. So that's really cool. We can have separate conversations about invest or other tools or other kinds of research that you had shared. So thank you so much for sharing your reflections on Alter COP29. And I just had a quick question. Like, it was hosted physically in all the different cities, the 5 cities?
Yeah, I believe so. So definitely, yeah, it must have been. We did have a few online panelists and speakers Zoom in, but yeah, it was in person, which I mean, as we all know, is when you have those like coffee conversations and you meet lots of really new, interesting people. So I think, yeah, to me, that was
Yeah,
benefit.
yeah, for sure. Without having to fly really far to go to somewhere where there's like 20,000 other people there for the conference, which, yes, I can imagine it has become very unwieldy. And we'll actually talk a little bit about COPs at this briefing. But before we jump into that, I wanted to quickly get a group photo with everybody. So if you are able to turn on your videos, we can get a quick photo with all of us who are here. Oh, and would love to also get some introductions in the chat.
Hi, Anuj. Good to see you and good to see everyone.
Hi. I was
Okay.
talking about hornbills and I have this hornbill video in my background. Give me a second.
Nice. Okay, Anushi, are you able to take the photo? I can also do a screenshot. In three,
hang on.
okay, hold your. Oh, you wanna have that video on
No,
in the
no, no.
back?
I just want to change that filter because it's not. We're not talking about hornbills today.
That's all right. We can. There are many hornbills in cities, right?
Yes.
Well,
Hi,
okay,
hi,
everyone,
Vivian.
hold your smile. 3, 2, 1, and one more. I think nobody closed their eyes, so that was great. Well, thank you. We will continue with our. Oh, where's my screen now? We'll continue with sharing updates from the global side, and I hope to see more of the introductions in the chat box so that I can also get a sense of who we have here. So December is a great time to have gatherings, many of us, but we are also really glad that you're able to join us to hear updates from a really busy COP season. In October, there was the Convention on Biological Diversity's COP, the Conference of Parties, so a large gathering of the countries that signed on to these conventions and also other stakeholders, including local governments. And in November, there was the climate change COP in Baku. So the Alta COP29 was to mirror this climate change COP. And in December, right now, there is the COP for the Convention to Combat Desertification. And these three conventions are called the sister conventions, the Rio conventions that came out from the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. There are other multilateral environmental agreements that have their own COPs, but this is kind of known as the COP season for these three COPs. And so we wanted to just share very quick updates from these COPs that are relevant to cities and biodiversity. Anushi, to you for COP29, really quickly.
Yes, hello everyone. So very quickly, so we had for the COP29, we had the vulnerable nations as it was being portrayed. We're very disappointed with the whole the achieve the this was supposed to be a finance COP, but that didn't make it. We had the energy discussions, which were mostly stalled in some ways, but we had the new collective quantified goal, which is targeting to close the climate finance gaps, which have been demanded from the developing countries. With respect to urban and nature, we had the multi-sectoral action pathways, which is to create resilient and healthy cities initiative. So this was basically a statement that was formed by the local governments together, and they are targeting to emphasize on healthy cities with a strong focus on climate resilience and NBS in cities, which is of importance to everyone here. The LGMA, which is the local government and municipal authorities constituency, they led three discussions which were targeting towards looking at producing new NDCs, which are more multi-level, gender responsive, and have a cooperative action. Secondly, looking at the financing of the sustainable urbanization per se, and also look at climate action at all levels, which includes looking at climate, nature, pollution, and also the intersection with the SDGs. The Baku adaptation roadmap is going to be coming up in 2025. This is to be held in mid 2025, is what they say. They're developing 100 indicators which the countries can look at for reporting adaptation. Then the Daring Sittings Forum is also going to be held in 2025, where they're looking at multi-level partnerships and governance, where cities are coming together to bring in a bottom-up approach to all these discussions. So that was more or less what it was. And then from the finance perspective, we have the Nature for Climate, which is a new coalition that has been formed between 28 international members. And they are looking at, as I mentioned earlier, the NCQG, which is to look at closing in the climate finance gap. The ADB also had their first discussions around Nature Solutions Finance Hub, which they have already inaugurated this, but they had a first round of panel discussions around what this would entail, where this platform is aiming to, raise at least $5 billion, which is supposed to be focused around nature-based solutions for biodiversity conservation. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Anushi. Jumping to another side of the world, not too far, we have the COP for the CCD, which is the Convention to Combat Desertification. It's still underway right now in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, and just highlighting some urban and nature aspects. The key messages there for local governments is that they are the first responders to land degradation and climate challenges. And so lots of urban issues were discussed. The urban-rural linkages was one of the key topics discussed in relation to urban entities at this COP. Then sustainable development around water and the recovery of degraded ecosystems happening particularly in cities as a pathway to addressing desertification. And similarly to sort of the local government's group that Anushi was talking about, the constituency in, oh, I got the
LGMA, yeah.
yeah, the LGMA constituency. The equivalent is the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments at the CCD COP, and they were advocating for systemic integration of local and regional governments' perspectives into the process. And I think that's quite, we see that actually also in the other COPs as well. Then a similar call for capacity building, accessible funding, and integration of local perspectives into national and international frameworks. There was a mayor's forum that happened just last Friday. And here there's the UN Web TV recording of it. We'll be sending out the slides as a newsletter to all registered participants so that you can click on the link to check the recording if you'd like. There was also a related side event called Rethinking Urban Landscapes, Equity, Restoration, and Resilience in Arid Regions. So if you're also working with cities that are in arid regions, this might be a side event worth checking out. So we've covered some of the things that happened at the COPs. The CBD COP for biological diversity was covered in our previous Asia briefing in November. So we would also send a link to the notes from that meeting for you to check it out. Another relevant global happening was that UN Habitat had their executive board second session where they discussed updates about their work on mainstreaming biodiversity into urban and territorial planning. So there's a project that they're working on in Mesoamerican countries, and this hotspot stoplight project that it's sort of like a modeling tool that can project urban expansion and the risks associated with biodiversity loss and climate change at a scale of 30 square meters. So that's a very relevant scale for cities to work with. So I thought that tool would be good to share, and they have presentations about this at the CBD COP and also at the World Urban Forum in November. Coming up in February, there is an IUCN professional certificate on measuring and monitoring urban nature. And if you or your colleagues are interested, please register at the link. We'll be sharing the slides. Some academic publications in the past month include remote sensing for urban biodiversity. And this is a meta-analysis and a review of research up to this point. And UN Habitat launched their primer on urban-rural linkages and land at UNCCD COP16 in December. So I think it was just a few days ago. And upcoming, they will have their toolkit on nature-based solutions in urban and territorial planning. So we're keeping an eye out for that, and we'll let you know in future meetings when they're released. In 2025, the City Nature Challenge will be running again. And so the call is to register by January 15th, and the participation date will be in April. I think that's what we have for the global updates, and we'll move on to announcements from the attendees. Meherwan had an announcement, but since he's not able to do it here, I'll let Anushi do it on his behalf.
Yeah, so Meherwan is basically with the Resilient and Inclusive Cities Lab, NTU, Singapore. And their ongoing project right now is on urban greening interventions in Sukur, Sindh, Pakistan, where they're looking at nature-based interventions, which includes tree planting drives, commercial and community-led maintenance programs, green space management, and restoration. So what they're seeking right now is they're looking for experts from backgrounds in NBS, which is to do with implementation of financing and who are familiar with forestry and ecology management and urban greening. So I think there are some of you who are there who can maybe reach out to him. So this is his email, and we would be circulating this information through the newsletter. Then we also were supposed to have Dr. Kuman here, who was from the Indira Gandhi National Open University. He was going to speak, he couldn't make it, but he wanted to talk more about his project, which they have recently completed, which is around urban residents and the ecosystem services, which can be provided through the Delhi Ridge, which is an important landscape element within the city. So they have done a participatory assessment, and he wanted to show us their results around that.
We'll see if he can send it to us for the newsletter, or maybe we can have him for another briefing when he.
Yes. Yeah, he would like to join the next one. So yes, we'll have him then. I think Pareen also has given another announcement reminder.
Yeah.
So maybe she can speak.
Karine, if you'd like
Thanks,
to just unmute
yeah,
yourself.
this is just in case some of you here have missed it. There are 2 ongoing calls for nominations for experts and fellows for the EBES assessments. So feel free to follow the link that I provided if you are interested in applying. Just as a piece of information here, I'm part of the task force on scenarios and models for IBES. So I guess I'm also happy to play this role, maybe through Meher or when I'm able to join myself, in terms of communicating and announcing some updates on that front.
Yes, that would be great. And just so that we're all on the same page, IPBES is essentially the IPCC equivalent for biodiversity and ecosystem services. So it's the authority on biodiversity and ecosystem services, if you'd like. So thank you for sharing that opportunity. And just wondering if any other attendees would also like to share announcements or
Or
thoughts.
they can also discuss or talk about their work or where they're from, something. Because we have a lot of new faces this time, so it'll be nice.
But I'm also being an East Asian, I'm also cognizant of time. So I would also want to respect everyone's time for joining us for our 30-minute briefing, and wanted to share with you, please feel free to share with us as the regional leads if you do have something to say but you're not able to, or you'd like to keep it for the future briefings. Our next briefing on what we call Urban Wednesdays will be on January 15th on a Wednesday. At that time, for all the different, to capture across a wide variety of time zones within our region. And today, I think we were able to get maybe 5 out of the 8 cities here. So if you'd like to feature your city, you can also send us an email and we can put it up for the next briefing. So thank you, everybody. Feel free to stay on if you'd like to continue the conversation, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for organizing. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.